Hi guys, welcome to today's session. This is our 15th session on data visualization, right? You can see 15th session over here. Welcome, Data Science Mentor Cohorts. The Data Science Mentor Cohorts is dedicated to anyone learning data science from scratch, where we use cases, examples, and mentorship to guide us through the learning curve. My name is Pablo. I am a data science professional. I am the founder, convener, and host of the Data Science Mentor Program. And today we're going to, just like we have been doing, we're going to look at another aspect of data visualization called ticks. Right. So let's get on with it. Right. So what are ticks? Right. So ticks are basically markers on our visualization axis. So they are markers on our visualization axis. And when we say axis here, we mean our X and Y axis. Now, why are ticks really important? And we're going to see what ticks are in a bit, right? Because we're going to basically write code and you see what ticks are. They don't look so conspicuous. They don't look so obvious, right? They don't look so obvious. So at the point you're wondering, okay, why don't we just leave it the way it is? But I'm going to show what ticks are and how important they are. Now, what do we use ticks for? So which is an interesting question. What are ticks used for? So what are ticks used for? Now, ticks interpret numeric or categorical variables. So that's what they do. They interpret numerical or categorical variables That's one. Second, ticks help us read chart scales and dimensions. So with it, we can read chart scales and dimensions. And they add reference points for comparison. So they add reference points comparison. So think of if you think of ticks like if you're on the road and you're traveling, and for every kilometer you get a tick on the highway. Yeah, it helps you know how far you have gone on a trip, right? So the question is, why on earth would we want to customize ticks? So that's another question, right? Why? Yeah, because I mean, let me call this customizing ticks, because this now makes it customizing ticks, because this now makes it makes this question more important. So again, why customize ticks? Now, if you think about it, sometimes ticks, the default ticks may not align with the visual you're building. So so default ticks, and I know by now you're asking, what what are ticks? But we're going to get to it. Default ticks may not align with your chat's intuition. That's one. Second, sometimes they may miss the important data points. And sometimes they can create overlaps, clutters, or confuse the audience. Again, I know the question is, what are we talking about? So so that's one. So I think it's just about time to literally show what ticks are all about. Right. So I'm going to show you guys what a tick is all about, and then point it out to you. Now, and you can, with that, you'll get to see. In fact, let me even share. I have this notebook. I created this notebook sometime in the past. I created this notebook in the past. Let me see. Right. So this notebook. Let me show you what ticks. See this guys? See these guys over here? These are ticks. These are ticks. You can see ticks over here. They help to see what they do. These are ticks. Right? Is there any other visualization here with a tick mark? That's an example of a tick. But let's not focus on this. Let's look at, we're going to create a tick, and then you're going to see what it looks like when it comes to a visual. Right? So that's what we want to do today. So to create a tick, right? This because the ticks come in two variants. There's a major tick and a minor tick. So let's see what a tick is. So this is what ticks look like. So now, first things first, I am going to import packages here. Again, so import the packages. So here we'll import Matplotlib. .pyplots as PLT. We import NumPy as NP. So I think these are the two things we want to use. Just like we've always done, would use a style sheet. So our style sheet, we'll use the style sheet, the classic style sheet. The classic style sheet has this black and white feature, so it would be ideal for us to see what ticks look like. So I'll say plt dot style does use and open brackets classic. So I'm going to use here. Then of course, so that we can manage our plots and indicate that our plots would be static and align with ourselves as we work with them. So this, we have that. Now to create to create a thick, I'm going to take an example for one of the books I reference a lot, right? So the first thing is I'm going to create the object plt.axis, and then I'm going to use logs. I'm going to use logs on the x and y axis. So I'm going to use log scales, and with those log scales, we get to see the axis and then determine how they are, right? So with this, you can use call x scale, and inside you can call log, then y scale, and of course you can reference log. Now we can use ax.set. So we want to set the x-axis limit. I'll set x-axis limit to 1 with respect to this. This is basically like an it's like a scientific notation to, depending on numbers and how you visualize them or how you want the numbers to be. Is that it? Okay. So we have to create a grid. And when we create the grid, we say we want our grid to be true. And then we go on to render plt.show. Yes, so you can see this. I hope you guys can see it. You can start to see, you can see some tiny ticks. Look at them. You see tiny ticks. Yep, these are ticks. Now, and of course, you can also see, you can see like there are major ticks, and you can also see minor ticks. That's what you see. You see major ticks and minor ticks. The major ticks are the large tick marks. You can see they have large tick marks, and the minor ticks are these guys. Look at them, very tiny tick marks. Now, to yourself, you're wondering, right? And of course, we have grid lines. You know, the minor ticks show the very tiny lines. And no, sorry, these are the grid lines, and you definitely see some, very tiny things going on there. Just like when I pointed this to you, you see this, see, yeah, ticks, major ticks and tiny ticks all going on. They become really important at a point when you can see that you're trying to basically check out this visual is a visual of emails that have been sent from an email account and the ones that have been received, and you can see how it looks here, right? Now, when you're visualizing data, the art of manipulating your ticks are so important. That's why if we go back here, we'll see that they interpret numerical categorical variables, they read chart scales and dimensions, and they add reference points for comparisons. And we're going to just look at it. I think it's genuinely important. It's genuinely important for us to see what ticks look like. At this point, it might not mean so much, but at a point where you need to look at your data, sometimes you typically want to understand a lot about or manipulate your visual or charts to show some lines that put some what I call it, some context to what you're doing. In fact, just so we know, these ticks exists, right? And there are some things called there are some things called locators and formatters, right? That they're like they're the ones that indicate where they're on the back end. They're Matplotlib objects that and functions that indicate where your minor and major ticks are. For instance, I can say print ax dot x axis. Yeah, dot x axis dot get underscore major underscore locator. Do that here. If you put that to tell you that there's a log locator object, I need to tell you where the log locator object is. Trying as much as possible to say maybe from 0 point to wherever this log is. You see that there's a log. It will tell you where they are, and they have locations, and it will show you where it is. This log locator is saying, look, this is where a major tick is. And you can also print this again and even ask for minor locators and say get minor locators, and to tell you that this minor locators exist in these different parts of this stuff. That's just to show you that they are there, right? Now, depending on what you want to do with the visual, you can choose to hide your ticks, right? You can choose to hide your ticks. And when you hide your ticks, you would you can determine where you want the ticks hidden, and yeah, and those ticks will be removed. For instance, let me hide. Let's see what hiding a tick looks like. You can see, if you pay attention, you see there are a lot of tick marks around this and all. Now see what happens if I choose to hide ticks, or yeah, I choose to hide to hide ticks. So let me call this hidden ticks. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the object ax, and then I'll call this plt.axis. So this is our axis. As usual, I'm going to use RNG to generate a data set, to generate data. Call this np the random dot default number generator. That's what this one's going to be. And then I put a seed so that we are sure that you know, we don't accidentally create any kind of numbers. It just stays within certain level, so it can be reproducible. And then when someone else wants to do something on his own, they can use another tick if they want to replicate what you are doing, or we use ticks so that it can be replicable. And when someone else can also reproduce whatever we've done, just to be sure we're in the same line. Or most times when we use these seeds, someone will create a project, and when they are done, you use a different seed just to be sure that their idea, their model can still, you know, generalize if it was in another sort of like numerical situation. So yep. So here we say ax.plot, and we're going to say rng dot random. So this is rng dot random. It's just like a coordinate of points that will be given at x and y axis. We just say 50. Right, so I close this. Then I would, of course, put dot grid. Now I'll put dot grid. Now when I put the grid value, you can see you know, the grid is here. You can see it says major, minor, both. and or I don't know if by default the grid is out or by default is off, but we're just going to set the grid. Let's going to set the grid here. Now, this is what we have. So I will, let me say plt.show. Right. So can you guys see that we have these visuals here, and you can see we have our tick marks. You can see how it cuts across. So this is this. Now let's hide our tick. So I'll copy this again and I bring it over here. Now this time when I come over here, I'm going to now add something over here. I'm going to now say ax dot y-axis dot set underscore major locator. So it's a major locator of our ticks, and I'm going to say plt dot null locator. So typically with this, we're going to it's like we set the locator of the major ticker, but this time when we put null, it's going to disappear. We're basically going to hide it. So we've set for the y-axis, right? So this is the y-axis here, and then we're going to go on. And let me see if we want to set for the x-axis. Okay, we can set for the x-axis. And we're going to use another thing. We're going to say ax dot x-axis dot set underscore major formatter. This is what we're using. So what this is to set the formatting of the major ticker, right? So when we do that again, we're now going to say null formatter here. We say plt dot null formatter. That's what it's going to do, to set the formatter of the major tick. But this time around, we say null. So now we've done this. Okay, let me add this. And then now when we run this, you can now see that the ticks, you can see how empty it looks. You can see formerly, you can see how they were. But now we've formatted everything. You can see that a lot of these numbers are no longer there. All we just have is an empty tick. We've removed the labels, but the grid lines are there. But we'll remove the labels from the x-axis and we'll remove the ticks, right? And it's having no ticks, I mean, it can be useful for some certain things. So ticks can be very useful. No ticks can also be useful. There are different things that can make it useful depending on what you're visualizing. You probably might not want the ticks there, and so that's why this sort of like very little stuff seems to become really important in terms of how you want what the kind of intuition you want. Like I mentioned, sometimes you can have your default ticks may not align with your chart's intuition. This is such an important aspect of what we're looking at. It may not align. You could miss an important data point, or they could be clutters, and it might not be necessary for it. So I'm going to use an existing visual that's been used in the past to explain this. Right now, this visual is going to be pictures of faces, right? And we're going to use it. We're going to have pictures of faces, and then go on to visualize it, and then see how important it is when you introduce ticks or when you don't introduce ticks, right? So I'm going to just write the code. First and foremost, I'll start off by okay, let me call this use case. Call this use case. So I'll create a figure and our axis. right? So we start off with fig and act. And of course, we're going to have plt dot subplots because we are going to be having more than one object in our plot. We're going to make our plot 5 by 5, no, 5 by 5. Then the fig size, which is the size of our plot, we're going to have a tuple of 5 by 5. That's the first. Now, remember when we talk about horizontal and the horizontal or height space on the width space, right? We're going to use fig, and all this we've worked on in the past. So if you are watching this, check out 14, session 14, session 13, 12. You'll see where we have done some customizations, and this becomes really important. You start to see why it makes a lot of sense. You're watching this session, a lot of things might not come in, except you've seen the other sessions. So yeah. So here we fig subplots. And what we're going to do is we're going to adjust. We're going to adjust, and we have a H space 0. We have a W space 0. Next, we're going to get some data. We're going to look at the sklearn. We're going to look at the sklearn repository where we'll fetch visual data, right? So yeah, let's get some. Let's get face data. So to do that, we are basically going to say from sklearn dot datasets, and then we're going to import Olivetti faces. Yes. And we're going to go and now say faces. Now we're now going to say fetch Olivetti faces, open bracket, and then we say we want the images. No. Yes. Then the next thing we've gotten that, and we will now do a for loop through the faces that we have so that we can now see what it looks like. So for this, I'm just going to copy it. So let me copy this. All right, so which tells us for I in the range, that is 5, for J in range, and we're going to set major locators. And when you see what we're going to do, we're going to remove the ticks. See that? Both from the Y and Y axis and X axis, and then we're go ahead to see what the faces look like. So I'm going to run this. So now that I have run this, we now have our plot, and then the way to see our plot is to use plt.show. So our plot object is there, and we'll run this. So you can see now, right? So if you can see that because we've done a bunch of things, we have removed all. You can see that it's just similar to this when you ask yourself, what's a use case? Now with these faces here, it looks like it makes a lot of sense, right? Now, you may not appreciate how much the sense to this is until we now introduce, again, I'm now going to still write this one. I'm going to now get this one again, everything here. And then I'll introduce stuff. Now I will show ticks. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to show ticks. And one really interesting thing about this is I had to look at this work. And if you realize over here, you would notice, where are those? I think there were other visuals that showed ticks. Yeah, look at this. This is how you can see ticks. You can see where is that stuff that showed ticks. Yeah, you can see set major locator. And you see, you put a maximum locator. So let me copy this. And I'll put like maximum locators inside it. And I come over here, and I'll remove this, guys. And then I put this here. So with this, I'm putting max locators. And this. And then I'll run this. There shouldn't be an error. What's going on? Right. Max locator is not defined. Oh, so sorry, guys. PLT dot, and here PLT, yeah, dot. This should work. All right, so we now have that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say PLT dot show, and you can see now. You wonder why it's not necessary to have some of these ticks. So look at that. Where's our faces? Where did our faces go to? Oh yeah. Okay, let me run this one. Let me run this one more time. So it's just one, right? So it should show up. Oh, come on. Oh, so sorry. Let me run this again. I hope we don't have like 3 objects because I ran it 3 times. Right, so you can now see that, look, you can see what ticks, with the ticks that are available here, you get to wonder, oh, what the hell, what on earth is this, right? Right, we now have ticks on them, unlike where we don't have any ticks. Right, there's no need for ticks. So it's not in every situation we need ticks. Sometimes your data typically just, your data typically is just there, and it's important without needing to have those ticks. This is somewhat of an extreme example, right? But the idea is, this is what it looks like if we typically want to make sense of what ticks are and how important they could be in the grand scheme of things, right? And when you set them and when you remove them, sometimes you can get to manipulate them, which makes, you can see that if you had a certain kind of ticks, you now go on to manipulate your ticks in many ways. But it's such an important, it's a thought process that is worth emphasizing. Butterfly effects, the butterfly effects, like a butterfly, shakes his wings in Argentina and changes in India. I don't know if that analogy fits, but it's that. So ticks are such interesting features when building visuals. And again, the reason I show this is I had done this work a long time ago. Again, it was from a book I read, I think on analyzing, it was on data analysis, exploratory data analysis. And at the time, seeing all these things, I'm wondering, why on earth are these things important? And then you now come back and realize that when you're making visuals like this, putting ticks are so important with all this. And now I sit back and I'm like, okay, this is typically an interesting thing to look at in terms of building your visual and ensuring you have ticks that put context to it, that gets your data to make some sense. And then sometimes when it's not necessary, especially if you're visualizing like images like this, right? And then you are typically wondering, okay, this would make a lot of sense if I don't have ticks. So guys, this is just what this is about ticks. My hope is that you get a takeaway on what ticks are all about, and in future, when you're building your visuals, you start to think maybe if you put some ticks to your visual, it could put some perspective to it. So if you remove it, it could make it a lot better. So that's all we have for this session. This is basically, I think, one of our fastest sessions where we don't typically have to do a lot, but yeah. So this is that. So, I mean, there are many things you can do with your ticks. If you don't, like we used the null locator, like for instance, we use null locator. So just to talk about these locators here, let me put the locator class. We used a locator class. Let's see. The null locator, yes. So we use the locator class called null locator. And what does null locator do? It's like, it says no ticks, right? Then I now used, you now say the max end locator, right? This is what we used here, the max end locator. And so what does the max end locator do? What the max end locator does is finds a maximum number of ticks at a location. So maximum number of ticks at a location. So there are other things, right? There's auto minor locator, there's fixed locators. You can use like fixed locators. For instance, you can have fixed locator. So what this does is that there'll be a tick locations are fixed. So there are places you want the locators to be. So you have like tick locations are fixed. Yeah, which other ones do we have? We have like log, like the one I used, the log locator is, locators fixed based on, the logarithmic space, for like this one, locators fixed based on their logarithmic space. So yeah, there are stuff there. There's also the formatters, the ones like null formatter, saying no labels on ticks. Fixed formatters will set strings manually for setting labels. So there are different formatter options and locator options that exist. So yeah, you do a simple Google search, you see it, or use the generative AI tool to bring them on. So that's basically what it is. So that means as we proceed in some of our visuals, we will start to determine if it's important to have a tick or not. Right, and so that we'll be seeing that as we proceed, especially when we now start doing high-level stuff. By the time we're done and I share the project we're going to be doing for this part of the work there, then you see as we proceed when we are doing some mentorship through this project. It becomes really interesting how you can make use of all this. Right, so yeah, so that's that for today. Yes, please go ahead.
So the thing is, I'm wondering where you talked about why customize ticks. Okay, whether or not is important as the case may be, the part where you said miss the important data points, the second reason you gave there, I don't really understand that part. And
so okay, sure, go ahead.
what are they really? What is there any need for the ticks really? Because from what I can see, the plot there, I can't even read through those dotted signs.
So so it makes a lot of sense when you have, you may not be able to read these dotted signs here because you're not supposed to. But the idea, for instance, this visual here, the idea was for us to plot a graph to tell incoming emails and outgoing emails. Right. Now, if you look over here, and from this first box here, you see that this user does not have much of outgoing emails. And so you can start to see that ticks like this start setting boundaries to see if there's a shift in the change of outgoing emails. Now, with this, you can see that this here says, you can see that from here to here is supposed to show off 2.5, or on average, like 3 emails, like 5 emails, 8 emails, 10. Now with these ticks, it tells you that from this point to this point, that these are you can use these ticks to now know that this person basically got like maybe really 1 email, right? So you can see that ticks play a huge role. If we were to remove the ticks on this one, you will realize that a lot of the context is gone. That's why there was a conversation that sometimes removing your ticks might be useful. But here, it doesn't look like it's useful until you come down here and you put pictures and then try to introduce ticks. You start to wonder, it's not necessarily. So with this, there are data points, like the faces of these individuals have been distorted because of the ticks, but you can now tell that the faces are clear here. So that's why I said this is really an extreme example, right? But as we proceed and do other things, I will show you cases where you start to see where ticks are important and where it's ideal to remove the tick locators. Right, so it's a thing. So I don't know if this explanation helps, but it does tell you that they're important. They play some sort of like a butterfly effect on your visuals, and especially when you want to tell a story. Right. So that's why
sorry, please.
Please go ahead.
I get what you just said, but the parts where you said to miss I think you need to go back to that place so that I can get what you really
miss important data points. That's what I said.
I'm wondering what does that mean?
Do you see the faces of these guys?
Yes, it's clear here.
If we introduce a tick, do you notice that there are some important, in terms of visualizing or trying to understand them, places like this have hidden them. So customizing ticks may be important when data points are important. For instance, you can see over here, this person's face a lot of the faces here are distorted.
Yes.
So you miss an important feature in the face if you have a tick there. If you remove the tick, if you customize the tick, then it's gone.
So it's like removing it now is customizing. That's what you meant. Removing the ticks.
Yes, it's the customization. That's what I was talking about here.
Okay.
These are the customizations of it. That's why I put one here and I added them here. You can see while there is none here. Okay, that's why I'm trying to let you know in this situation, look at where the ticks play a huge role, because with all these boxes and all these ticks here, they sort of like tell us from 2020 to 2022. Okay. You can see plays a huge role, right? So ticks play this role. And when I was talking about ticks, like when it was interesting when I started to read about ticks as I progressed in the learning, and which is also an interesting, it's a perfect segue to talk about your learning development. Sometimes when you're learning stuff and you're at the beginning of your learning journey, a lot of the things you do will come across as, I don't even know what I'm doing, but this code works. At the time I was learning and reading from this book. I had to go back and get this when it came to talking about this. I knew a lot of these things. I didn't know what a lot of these things meant. For instance, because you can see that it's an old notebook and it has a lot of warnings, right? But you can see here, should be used with a fixed number of ticks, i.e. after set ticks or using a fixed locator. So which means if I was to work with clearing these warnings, I have to go and start figuring out if some of these guys have a fixed number of ticks, which means going to maybe the class that was created, or trying to understand if there was a need for max or limited ticks, right? So, but when you're learning at first, a lot of these things don't just seem obvious, right? But as you proceed and you start to see them, you start to see that sometimes the difference in your visual is just a very tiny thing. That's why I mentioned the butterfly effect, right? So again, you'll see it. For instance, like in our next session, we are going to look at customizing configurations, even style sheets, which is backgrounds. Then when we start to customize style sheets, you start to look like, you see where it is important to look for specific types of colors in your visuals. And this is where you start to look at color palettes. But a lot of the time when you start learning stuff, color palettes don't mean anything, because you're like, I mean, it's important to just put colors there, but why are we trying to find a specific color? So these things just keep improving. That's why it's like we're drawing closer to the end of what we're doing, and you start to see things that have tiny effects that matter a lot, because at some point you may need to customize what you're doing because you have an audience. Right. So I think that's one idea, but I think there are a ton of them. But this is one idea for looking at things.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So if you are watching, if you're here live on the call, please feel free to ask a question. If you watch the recorded session, if you watch it later, feel free to drop a question in our Telegram channel. And if you're watching it live, if you're watching it from a live stream, feel free to drop a question in the comment section. All right. All right, guys. Are there